Chess Gym. I'm your host, Rene Phillips. Looking forward to another exciting time. Want to take the time out to say thank you so much for all your wonderful emails and all of the encouragement that has come by way of the videos that we produce. We want to thank you and let you know that we love you, we appreciate you, and if I can spare you the heartache, the despair, and the disappointment that I have incurred over the years of trying to master this game. Finally got my master's title and master's certificate in 1993. Have been able to play some of the best and top players in the U.S. Have been successful sometimes, have been unsuccessful other times, but my objective here is to be able to teach, to be able to inform and educate, and spare you some of the hurt and the anguish that I've received at the board as a result of not having the information that I'm going to make readily available to you. Please drop us a line at the Chess Gym. That's www.thechessgym.com. I'm your host again, Rene Phillips, with the chess video of the week. And tonight we will talk about and highlight in two sections tactics that result from the open rook file or opening rook file tactics generated against the enemy king. As a policeman of 22 years, let me tell you and assure you that you need to check out a neighborhood before you move there. Don't buy a house in a neighborhood without checking it out first. And my police experience can tell you that if you're castling in an area where there is an open rook file or the potential for a rook file to come open very quickly, that is an unsafe neighborhood. Don't move to a neighborhood, baby, where there are all kinds of vagrants, open rook files, or the potential for a rook file opening is very present. I'm not telling you what I heard. I'm telling you what I know from experience. Tonight we'll look at two games, and we want to teach two things. One, we want to teach that it is very, very silly to move into an unsafe neighborhood. Don't castle on the side of the board where the potential for a rook file opening against your king is ever present or very, very real. Castle and buy a home on the other side of the board. Secondly, if you have the opportunity to open a rook file against the enemy king, by all means do it. Spend the money. Buy the artillery, sacrifice the material, open the rook file, and just unleash an onslaught of pieces against the enemy king. But don't get your hopes up. Don't overestimate your chances and your resources. Calm down, take a deep breath, and it will spare you hours and hours of grief and embarrassment. Let's start. This first game will be against a national master that was played at rated game in 3 minutes. And some people will ask, what's the sense of going over or annotating a rated 3-minute game? I'll tell you a lot of sense in it. First of all, in Blitz, you have the opportunity to look and explore myriads, thousands, hundreds of variations from openings that you play on a regular basis. You can experiment with them online against good competition, learn about all the holes, the mistakes, the nuances of the position, and you can actually play several games in a short period of time and walk away with mounds and tons and chunks of knowledge and experience that would not be afforded to you in a regular tournament game. Let's face it, how much are you going to learn from one tournament game that results in an opening that you may play or may not play for another 2 months or until the next time you play in a tournament? Utilize the internet, utilize Blitz play to expose holes in your opening repertoire, to expose holes in your play, and it will save you a lot of heartache once you go to the Saturday tournament. Not telling you what I know, telling you what I heard, baby, telling you what I know. My opponent was against a national master, and this is rated Blitz 3-0. He opened with D4. I responded with D5. He played C4, which is standard Queen's Gambit. I played C6. Remember, my objective is to merge or transpose the game to an opening or a position that I'm familiar with. Some people ask, well, wait a minute, Rene, you mean to tell me you play the London system with the black pieces as well as the white pieces? How boring. Well, boring to you, but great for me, because the possibility of me steering the game to a position that I'm familiar with, the plans, strategies, and needs of the position are much greater based on the fact that I have experience in the opening from both sides than they would be if I find the latest opening manual, ECO, MCO, and find the hottest line that the top players in the championship cycle are playing, and then I try to play that in a tournament with no regard for the nuances of the position or the strategy and plans that are necessary for the position that's going to result. Hey, I'll stay boring and I'll stay prepared, and hopefully if you're aspiring and reaching towards chess mastery, you'll allow me to save you some grief, some heartache, and allow you to maximize and make the best use of your time. So, having said that, my opponent played g3. I followed with bishop to f5, bishop to g2. I played e6 to bolster the center. Now, if white plays pawn takes pawn on d5, I have the option of playing or recapturing with the pawn on e6 or the pawn on c6. Talk about flexibility. Flex who? Ability. Thank you. My opponent plays knight to f3. I play knight to f6. Now, teaching moment here. This is so cool. This is a standard Queen's Gambit or Catalan type setup against the Slav or the London system defense. But let me take an opportunity to teach here. My opponent and I have both reached this position by a different move order, meaning we were trying to not disclose our intentions as to the opening or defense that we were going to play until the very last moment. Let me explain. Look at the position. Knight on f3, bishop on g2, bishop on f5, knight on f6, pawns for black on e6, d5, and c6, duo of pawns for white at d4 and c4. The exact same position can be obtained and reached by a different move order. Don't blink your eyes, don't look, don't go away, baby. This is going to be quick. Knight to f3, knight to f6, g3, d5, bishop g2, bishop f5, d4, e6, c4, c6, and guess what? Yes, we've reached the exact same position, but by a different order of moves. Both players in this 3-minute game are looking and vying for the slightest advantage, even if it comes by way of varying the move order so that you can trick your opponent into playing something he's unfamiliar with. But guess what? We still on knowledgeable ground, baby. We played this position how many? Thousands of times. And we are familiar and comfortable with the plans resulting from this position. Our opponent plays b3, attempting to a double fianchetto, bringing the bishop to b2. We play knight at b to d7. He plays bishop to b2. I play bishop to d6. I'm sorry. My opponent plays knight at b to d2. Teaching moment. Let's go back. Now white is looking for a waiting move. Typically when people look for waiting moves, they play things like a3 or they play things like h3. Those moves have nothing to do with the position. My opponent doesn't want to be predictable by castling. It's a good opportunity to castle. It's great to castle. But my opponent would much rather play a move and disguise his intentions. Well, you don't have to compromise your position or your development to do that. There is a good developing move here other than castling, and my opponent elects to play, instead of h3 or a3, he plays knight at b to d2. This move continues his development. It doesn't indicate that he's going to castle on the next move. It's a nice waiting move. Yes, white could have castled, but he plays knight at b to d2. But guess what? Black does not have to castle at all right now, nor does black have to disclose what side of the board he wants to play on. Black has a great waiting move. In fact, you will see this in the next video that we will do tonight. This game is played against a national master, two masters playing each other. You will see in the next game, I will step it up in opposition. The player I will play in the next game will have an international master title, but the strategy and the principles of A, activating your pieces, being safe with your king, and C, centralizing your pieces will still apply. Doesn't matter if you're playing Kasparov, Karpov, or Bubba around the corner, the rules of chess still apply. Here I have a great waiting move, not a6, not h6, even though h6 would be a decent move because after h6, the resulting knight to h4 would give me a love square for the London bishop at h7. But I have a better waiting move. Here, black plays queen to e7. Love this move because it does two things. It forms a battery of the queen and bishop on the a3 to f8 diagonal. Not to mention, it gives me the option of castling to what? Either side. Correct. My opponent has no idea what side of the board I'm going to castle on. And queen to e7 provides me the option of playing a dual purpose move, and yet I refuse to disclose at this point of the game what side I'm going to castle on. Okay, White, you want to continue to play waiting moves? Come on, baby, we're waiting on you. I have another waiting move waiting on you that's not going to take away from my position, not going to compromise my development, and continue to keep you in amazement and in wonderment as to where I'm going on this, which side of the board I'm going to castle on. White has another waiting move he can play here. He can play queen to c1, which would prohibit me from bringing my bishop to a3. Eventually, I may play bishop to a3 with ideas of playing pawn to a5 and a4, loosening up the pawns on the queen side. But my opponent elected to castle here, and I play h5. Mind you, there is nothing going on in the center. The center is fluid, but there isn't any potential for White to play e4 immediately. Remember, flank attacks are best countered by counterattacks where? In the center. Very good. I play h5. My opponent here plays rook to c1. Obviously, it looks to my opponent that since I'm playing h5, I have plans of castling on the queen side. So rook to h1 is great. It gives him the opportunity or the option once I castle queen side, should I go there, of opening the bishop file by playing pawn takes d5. But my opponent doesn't know that I've already been beaten delirious by castling onto the sides or castling and living in areas where there are rook files open or the potential lies for rook files to open very quickly against my king. So, guess what? He doesn't know this, but man, you don't hold your breath waiting for me to castle or buy a house in the neighborhood where there are open rook files. I'm a policeman. I know what kind of crime goes on there. So, I play h4. My opponent is comfortable in the fact that since he has knights at f3 and d2, that it is virtually impossible to checkmate him. And let me say this. I've taught my students and teach my students that if you have knights, if you're the black pieces, and you have knights at f6 or f8, you are virtually invulnerable to a kingside mating attack. Conversely, if you have the white pieces and you have knights at f3 and d2, f3 and f1, you are pretty much invulnerable to attack. But let me qualify that and let me educate a little bit. Let's say and qualify those statements by saying if you can maintain a knight on f3 and f1 with the white pieces, your king side can remain pretty much invulnerable, impenetrable to attack. If you have the black pieces, if you can maintain a knight on f6 or f8, your king's position is practically invulnerable to attack. Keyword, maintain. So here after knight, my opponent plays knight to e5. My opponent understood that had he played knight takes h4, I was going to play the iron fist, rook takes h4. That's right, my karate move, rook takes h4 so fast that knight would have come off the board so fast there would be smoke on the h4 square. But not liking the resulting position after the exchange sacrifice on h4, my opponent came up with the plan of knight to e5, and his objective is to play knight to e5 and bring the other knight to f3 and maintain the knights on f3 and e5 and virtually just begin to attack me on the queen side. At this point, I did what? Yes, we opened the rook file. In fact, what are we talking about tonight? Oh, yes, opening the rook file against the enemy king, or tactics that can result from opening the rook file against the enemy king. Now, my opponent didn't know that this game was going to result in a video, so hey, we just want to apologize to him. I am not stating that this game is a hallmark of my brilliance and that I was able to ingeniously checkmate this master because of tactics and brilliant maneuvers. Actually, this game is the result of hundreds of losses in similar positions where I've had great attacks, gotten excited, and did not follow through with the demands of the position and let them get away. In fact, you know the story. Have a grandmaster on the ropes, have an international master on the ropes at weekend tournament. There's a crowd of people around, and all of a sudden, the crowd dissipates, and you know what's happened. The player that had the underdog has gotten overconfident, missed one of the nuances of the position, or didn't follow up with the correct plan, and the international master or GM got off the hook. And then you have one of your friends come up to you and say, "Hey man, what happened, Rene?" Hey, well, hey man, I had him. Yeah, I saw that, but what happened? Well, I lost. What? I lost. Hey man, but I had a great position. Oh, I saw that. Hey man, let me show it to you. Well, look, hey, don't have time right now. I'm going to my next round. Hey man, next round's not for another 2 hours. I know, but can we look at the game next week at the next tournament? In other words, he's just saying, man, I don't want to hear and look at all the excuses about the fish that got away. Why do we need to look at a game where you had somebody and you didn't apply the principles and the plans and strategies necessary in the position to bring home the bacon? Man, I am so tired of that and having foiled at those attempts, and hopefully through this lesson I can teach and help you avoid that. Anyway, after knight to e5, we play knight to g4. Remember, our objective is to keep the knights off of f3 and f1, and I implement a plan to do that. My opponent plays knight to f3. We play f6. The objective of f6 is to remove the knight from its perch at e5, and guess what? Now that the other knight's at f3, he won't have knights at f3 and f1. We've taken care of that. After knight to e5, knight takes knight, and now I want you to think about what would be a great move here. Sure, we can play queen takes d7, but there's another move, man, that is just super, just cool. In fact, I like to refer to it as the cool king. That's right. We, in one move, will capture the knight and connect our rooks at the same time. Can you see it? Yes! King takes d7. Yes, our king is cool and chilling on the d7 square. We have also recaptured the material and connected both rooks in what? One move. Yes, sir. Now, the objective is to make sure that we get White's king before he gets to ours. White plays the natural c takes d5 and opens the file against my king. Oh, no, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Not against my king, because my king is at d7, and my opponent doesn't know that I'm not going anywhere near that neighborhood. I'm going to stay right near the police station so that when the trouble breaks out, okay, now I'm not calling the police for me. That's so the trouble can call the police and keep me from doing something that would really land me in jail, because I will protect my house, will protect my loved ones, my household, and my belongings. Don't call the police for the bad guy. Call the police for yours truly. My dad used to say, if you see me in a fight with a bear, help the bear. Okay, help the bear here, folks. King to d7, exchanges of pawns on d5. My opponent plays a3. Resist the temptation to grab material. if I play bishop takes a3, bishop takes a3, queen takes a3, I've been distracted from my operations on the king side. Guess what? The opportunity I have to attack and assault the king is greater than the gain of material here. Object of the game is not material accumulation, but checkmating the king. Resist the temptation to win material and proceed with your attack. I played g5 here. Someone's saying, Rene, I know you're trying to get the knight off of f3, but there's a knight on g4. g5 can't get to g4 until you move the knight. You're so right, but the objective behind g5 is dual. I planned on moving my knight soon and getting my pawn to g4, but more importantly, g5 allows my queen to go where? Yes! h7! Very soon in one move, my opponent plays b4, I play queen to h7, battery of queen and rook on the rook file, and guess what? You don't want to castle, or you don't want to buy a home where there are, what? Open rook files. h7 and h8 form a battery of queen and rook, the two most powerful pieces in the game, I might add, on what? An open rook file. Where's the king? On the open rook file, next to it, not on it, but next to it. Hey, this game won't be long. The king has now dispatched his forces, said, hey fellas, the ship is sinking, and sinking fast. You've been loyal, you've been dedicated. I do not want to have the responsibility of losing my life and losing the lives of all my dedicated servants. Run! So the rook goes to e1 in an attempt to give the king some space to retreat. Now, bishop to e4 is a beautiful move. I love this. And look, this is not brilliance, just come as a result of missing and falling so many opportunities in similar positions. This bishop radiates power, a laser, through f3, through g2, all the way to the g1 square. And I'll show you why. White plays queen to d2. Our move here is knight to h2. Remember, our objective is to dislodge the knight from f3 and f1. Even here now, you'll feel the laser-like power of the bishop on e4. Obviously, white cannot play knight takes h2 because after queen takes h2 check, the king is forced to f1, and then queen takes g2 is mate. Or, if you really want to get fancy, if the crowd's around, you can play bishop takes g2 check, or, bishop takes g2 mate, or this is real pretty. Queen to what? h1 check, bishop takes h1, rook to h1 check and mate. That's for the crowd. Okay, thank you, appreciate it, thank you very much. But that's one reason why the knight can't take. But also keep in mind the laser-like influence of the bishop on e4. My opponent played a4. Now you have knight to f3 check. Now, note, because of the laser influence of the bishop on e4, white can't play bishop to f3 because queen to h1 check, forcing the bishop to recapture, and then rook takes h1 would be what? Yes, checkmate, in your face, checkmate. So, the subsequent position, resulting position, white is forced to recapture with the pawn. Now, first thing most people would do is think about a square to move the bishop to and probably play bishop f5 with the intention of playing bishop to h3. But remember, when you see a good move, look for a better one. Bishop to e4, the bishop on e4 radiates power all the way through the pawn at f3, through the bishop at g2, to the h1 square. Can you find a brilliant... Let me ask this. First of all, let me say this. This is a grandmaster move. It really takes some creativity to see this. Now, this is a rated game in 3 minutes against the national master. And let me say, I'm not a great tactician. I'm not a brilliant tactician. I'll let other people say that. But because I played so many positions and foiled attempts after having great attacks so many times, I know the right moves in this kind of position by rote. Can you find a great move for white? I'm sorry, for black here. Black has a punishing move. Think about the laser-like influence the bishop has, not just on f3, not just on g2, but all the way to h1. Do you see it? You're exactly right. Queen to h1 check forces, you can't play queen takes h1 because the rook on h8. Bishop takes h1. Now I know someone's saying, oh wait a minute, you know what, this guy just messed up in his video. That's not checkmate. What is he doing? Has he lost his mind? What does he want to show how not to finish another position? I thought he said he learned from all the mistakes, and here he is making a video with a mistake. Rook takes h1 check, driving the king to another square. Now, I want you to mind you, if the king comes here, what do you think is going to happen? Well, that would be a great move. That would be a great move, my friend. Very good move. But upon this move, we play here, check. If the king goes here, we play bishop takes f3 with mate to follow. And if the king takes the rook, we play bishop here with mate to follow. Rook comes to the open file, and it's going to be mate to follow. But the resulting combination didn't end that way. In fact, let me show that again, because somebody's going to say, yeah, okay, he doesn't have to take the rook. What if he goes to g2? Well, you're right, he doesn't have to, but then we hit him right behind his head again at h2, and if the king comes to f1 and try to get away, no, we close the door with bishop to f3, and it's mate in 1. And if he elects not to go that way, if he decides to take the rook, we close the door again by playing bishop takes f3, and rook comes over to h8, and it's going to be mate very shortly. Yes, sir. No way out of this one. It's what? Curtains. Well, my opponent didn't play either of those moves. He took the rook. King takes h1. We play bishop takes f3 check. And yes, this is game in 3 minutes. My opponent goes to h2. We follow with rook to h8 check, king to g1, rook to h8 mate. But my opponent plays king to g1. We play rook to h8. And now, we've all had games where we've had people beat so bad, they just start throwing away pieces. And because we see it's mate in 1, forced mate in 1, we think that any move wins. My opponent, and even computers, are very, very crafty. Once they're caught in a mate in 1, they'll just start throwing pieces. But mind you, don't think that any move wins. My opponent plays rook to e7 check, and it would seem in this position that any move wins. If you take that rook with the king, the game is over, because queen check to e3, wherever the king moves, the queen takes the bishop, and this is a teaching moment. This kind of thing has happened to me many times, so I can spare you the heartache and let you know that when you see a good move, look for a better one. Upon rook to e7 check, the last trap by white, I play bishop takes e7. There are no more checks. No way that white can stave off checkmate. And here, my opponent resigns in the wake of the impending rook to h1 check and mate. That's all from the Chess Gym. Hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. I'm Rene Phillips.